Lieutenant Carter stepped off the transport plane with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. The desert air of the SEAL base was sharp and dry, a stark contrast to the mild coastal town she had grown up in. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her boots gleaming, and her gaze steady, betraying none of the doubts that occasionally whispered in her mind. Years of rigorous training, long nights of study, and countless early mornings had led her here, into a world dominated by some of the toughest soldiers in the United States Navy. Yet, despite all her preparation, she couldn't ignore the familiar flutter of uncertainty. This was a new unit, a new environment, and the dynamics here were unlike anything she had faced before. As she walked toward the main gate, noticed the stairs. SEALs of every size and build, clad in tactical gear or casual uniforms, paused mid-task to watch her approach. Some nodded curtly, others smirked, whispering under their breath. She sensed immediately that first impressions mattered, but so did actions, and she was determined to prove herself, quietly but unmistakably. "Lieutenant Carter," called a voice, crisp and authoritative. Turned to see Lieutenant Commander, a senior officer known for his sharp wit and occasionally cruel sense of humor. "Welcome to Delta Unit. We've got a little tradition for newcomers. Gate duty." "Blinked gate duty?" she asked, her tone calm but cautious. Smirked, "Yes. You'll be stationed at the gate for the first week. Keeps you busy and gives the unit a chance to get to know you." His eyes twinkled with amusement as he glanced at a few nearby SEALs, who exchanged barely concealed grins. Quickly realized this wasn't just a routine assignment. The gate duty was a classic setup, a low-status task, often used to humble new arrivals, sometimes even as a joke to see how they would handle boredom, scrutiny, and the mockery of seasoned soldiers. His jaw tightened ever so slightly, but her outward demeanor remained composed. "Understood, sir," she replied crisply, saluting before turning toward the gate. Every step she took echoed with a determination she hoped the unit would notice. Though the assignment felt trivial, she recognized it as a subtle test, a chance to demonstrate professionalism where others expected weakness. When she reached her post, the first thing she noticed was how quiet it was, save for the hum of nearby vehicles and the distant clang of equipment. A few SEALs lingered nearby, pretending to check logs or fix equipment, though knew their attention was fully on her. She logged the first vehicle with precision, checked credentials, and greeted the driver with a firm but polite tone. Her actions were deliberate, her posture unyielding. Every detail mattered. This was more than a gate, it was her stage. Whispers began immediately. "She's not nervous at all. Look at how she handles that paperwork." A few skeptical eyes narrowed. Others smirked, thinking they might catch her off guard with a tricky ID check or a sudden instruction. Noticed none of it overtly. She focused instead on doing her job flawlessly, aware that competence often silenced doubt faster than words ever could. From a distance, Captain James Monroe, the SEAL commander, observed quietly. Known for his impeccable judgment and ability to spot leadership potential, Monroe's sharp eyes lingered on. There was something in her calm demeanor, the way she moved with purpose despite the unspoken scrutiny, that caught his attention. He made a mental note. Some people command respect not by force but by presence, and she had it. As the sun climbed higher, continued her shift with the same meticulous attention. She checked each arriving vehicle, logged every detail, and maintained a vigilant watch over the gate. The men around her exchanged nervous glances. The joke that was meant to humble her was already beginning to backfire. While they had expected a timid, inexperienced officer, they were faced with a presence that was calm, competent, and unshakable. By the end of her first morning, had not only completed her duties flawlessly, but she had also sent a clear message. She was not here to be underestimated, and even gate duty could become a proving ground. Behind her quiet professionalism, a storm of respect, slowly brewing among the onlookers, was beginning to form. The morning sun had barely reached its peak when settled into her post at the base gate. It was quiet, too quiet for some, but she preferred it. The hum of engines, the faint chatter of passing guards, and the occasional squawk of a radio filled the air, but nothing threatened the calm she carried like a shield. Her eyes swept over every approaching vehicle with precision, her hand hovering near the logbook as she prepared to record names, ranks, and credentials. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and calm, a stark contrast to the whispered expectations of those watching her. A convoy of trucks rumbled toward the gate, dust rising behind their tires, stepped forward, holding her hand to signal them to stop. One driver, a young sailor with barely a week of experience himself, hesitated, fumbling with his paperwork. A ripple of laughter passed among a few lingering SEALs. They expected her to snap or scold, but remained composed. "Take your time," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Confirm the manifest and approach slowly." Her tone carried authority, not irritation, and the men around her faltered. Some blinked, unable to hide their surprise at her poise. She logged each truck with meticulous care, her pen scratching against paper with purpose. Every detail mattered: license plate numbers, times of arrival, personnel counts. A senior SEAL leaning against a nearby wall muttered under his breath, "She's got eyes everywhere, didn't expect that." Another tried to smirk, attempting a sly comment about how gate duty was beneath her. Heard none of it, her focus absolute. Yet even in her silence, she made her presence felt. The SEALs who had intended to mock her now exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to continue the prank or retreat. As the hours passed, professionalism never wavered. She answered questions politely, directed vehicles efficiently, and maintained constant vigilance. When a delivery driver accidentally entered from the wrong lane, she corrected him calmly, guiding him to the proper checkpoint without raising her voice. Even the snickers and stares of the men trying to catch her off guard began to fade. Some shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their harmless joke was failing spectacularly. Captain Monroe, the SEAL commander, observed from a distance, leaning casually against the side of a building. He had seen countless officers arrive, some brash, some timid, most unremarkable. Yet's demeanor intrigued him. There was a quiet confidence in her movements, an unwavering focus in her eyes, and a calm decisiveness in her gestures. He noted every detail: how she remained unflustered, how she engaged with the men without condescension, how she commanded respect without demanding it. He sensed potential, a leader in the making, and found himself paying closer attention than he normally did to new arrivals. Around midday, a minor challenge arose. A delivery vehicle approached with incomplete paperwork, causing a pause at the gate. Some guards would have barked orders or panicked. Others would have ignored protocol to avoid confrontation. However, handled it seamlessly. She instructed the driver to park temporarily, retrieve the necessary forms and the details with calm authority. When she returned, the logs were complete, the convoy moved on, and not a single security protocol was breached. A few SEALs, who had been leaning casually against the wall, stared in disbelief. The joke was unraveling. By late afternoon, had processed dozens of vehicles, corrected small errors without fuss, and maintained a watchful eye for potential threats. She moved with a quiet grace, alert to every detail, never showing fatigue or irritation. The men who had expected her to falter now found themselves studying her, some reluctantly impressed. Even the skeptics began to acknowledge that she was different, resilient, capable, and unshakable. As the sun dipped lower, allowed herself a brief moment to reflect. She thought of the long journey that had brought her here, countless early mornings running drills, grueling physical training, and mental challenges that tested every limit she once knew. This joke of a gate duty assignment was just another challenge, one she would face with the same discipline and focus that had carried her through every trial before. She didn't just endure it, she excelled, quietly transforming a lowly post into a stage that revealed her true strength. Even as the SEALs whispered and shifted nervously behind her, Captain Monroe remained observing, a faint smile on his face. He had seen something extraordinary, a young officer proving that excellence often reveals itself in unexpected places. Carter was not just surviving her first day, she was already commanding attention, respect, and curiosity, all without raising her voice. And the base would soon understand that this was only the beginning. The afternoon at the gate had been uneventful. At least, it seemed that way to the untrained eye. Carter had already processed dozens of vehicles, handled minor mistakes, and kept the gate secure without incident. Yet the calm air held a subtle tension, the kind that only seasoned military personnel could sense. The men around her still whispered among themselves, uncertain, watching her every move, waiting for some slip, some moment that might prove their joke correct. But as always remained undisturbed, her focus absolute. Every vehicle, every ID, every movement was checked and logged with precision. Then it happened. A black, unmarked SUV roared down the main road leading to the base. The driver approached at an unusual speed and immediately noted the lack of proper identification displayed on the dashboard. A security breach, even minor, could escalate quickly in a place like this. Her hand hovered over the radio, ready to alert the internal security team, her eyes scanning the vehicle and its occupants. The SEALs nearby froze, some unsure whether to step in or remain as spectators. They had expected to panic, to falter, but she remained calm, moving with confidence born of years of training. "Hold position," she commanded, her voice cutting through the whispers like steel. The driver, noticing her hand gesture, slowed slightly but continued forward. Assessed the situation, a potential threat or perhaps a high-ranking officer whose credentials had not been displayed properly. Regardless, procedure had to be followed. She radioed the internal security team, her tone calm, precise, and authoritative. The SEALs watched, some holding their breath as stepped toward the SUV. "Identification and credentials, please," she instructed. The driver fumbled, papers slipping from his hands, and one of the men whispered, "She's going to lose it now," but didn't flinch. She bent slightly, retrieved the paperwork, and calmly each document against her log. Her eyes never left the vehicle, alert for any sudden movement. Minutes passed like hours. A single wrong move could have caused chaos. Composure, however, remained unshaken. She directed the driver to park in a secure area while waiting for verification, all without raising her voice or showing frustration. Nearby SEALs exchanged uneasy glances. Even the most confident among them were impressed. The gate duty joke was turning into a silent testament to her skill under pressure. Captain James Monroe, the SEAL commander, had been observing from a distance since the morning. Now his interest sharpened. He had seen many officers arrive, some confident, some timid, but few displayed the kind of presence did. Calm, authoritative, and unflappable, she had managed a real-life security incident flawlessly. He noted every detail, her posture, her decisiveness, and the way she maintained control without needing to assert dominance. Monroe recognized leadership when he saw it, and he saw exactly that. As the situation resolved and the SUV was and allowed through, the SEALs near the gate let out barely contained exhalations. Some looked at each other, acknowledging silently that they had misjudged her. Whispers of admiration began to circulate, though grudgingly. "She handled that perfectly," one muttered. Another shook his head, muttering, "Didn't see that coming." Returned to her post as if nothing had happened, logging the last vehicle for the shift with the same meticulous care as before. The gate was secure, the threat neutralized, and she had done so without drama, panic, or hesitation. To those who had come expecting to see a flustered newcomer, it was a revelation. Carter was not only competent but extraordinary under pressure. By the time her shift ended, even the skeptics among the SEALs had begun to respect her. Captain Monroe remained in the shadows, silently approving. He had witnessed something rare, an officer whose true strength emerged not in loud declarations or showy maneuvers, but in the quiet, unshakable command of responsibility. His first real test under pressure had been more than successful. It had earned her the kind of attention that mere competence rarely brought. As she left the gate that evening, her posture remained poised, her expression calm, but inside, a flicker of satisfaction burned. She had survived her first true challenge, earned a measure of respect, and perhaps most importantly, begun to rewrite the narrative the unit had tried to impose upon her. The joke of gate duty had already transformed into a stage for proving her mettle, and the base had no idea this was only the beginning. The next morning arrived at the base gate with the same calm determination, though she could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Whispers had spread overnight, quiet rumors that carried through the hallways and barracks like wildfire. "Did you see how she handled that SUV yesterday?" one SEAL muttered. "She didn't even flinch." Another added, "I didn't think anyone could do that without losing it." The men who had planned to joke and test her now exchanged uneasy glances. The new girl was no longer an easy target. She was a subject of curiosity, admiration, and for some, resentment. Of course, remained unaware of the conversations swirling behind her. Her focus was on the tasks at hand, on the minutiae of gate duty that many overlooked. Yet she noticed subtle changes in behavior. Men who had smirked yesterday now averted their eyes. Others lingered a little longer, unsure whether to approach her or maintain distance. Some of the more skeptical SEALs, resistant to the idea of a young female officer excelling where they had expected failure, decided to challenge her in small, calculated ways. A delivery driver approached with paperwork slightly out of order, and a gruff voice muttered, "See if she can handle this one." Didn't hesitate. She calmly assessed the documents, checked against the logs, and gave precise instructions for correction. Not a single tone of irritation escaped her lips. The SEALs observing her were stunned. Not only had she managed the situation flawlessly, but she had also done so with authority, grace, and tact. One muttered under his breath, "She's unshakable." Another more quietly said, "We underestimated her." Even as these small tests unfolded, his mind remained focused on her responsibilities. She noted each vehicle, confirmed every credential, and maintained her watch with an unyielding vigilance. The air was tense, though, charged with subtle competition. Some of her peers didn't like being outperformed, particularly by someone they had intended to humiliate. But they couldn't argue with results. Her actions spoke louder than their skepticism. From a distance, Captain Monroe observed the scene, leaning casually against a support beam. He had been monitoring her progress since her first day, and each moment at the gate added to his quiet admiration. He saw her strategy, how she handled challenges without overreacting, how she maintained control in tense situations, and how she quietly but unmistakably commanded respect. Monroe recognized that leadership is often revealed in small, precise actions rather than loud proclamations, and was demonstrating it in spades. By mid-morning, the whispers had evolved into small murmurs of recognition. Rumors of her composure under pressure spread quickly, with even the more skeptical SEALs begrudgingly acknowledging her skill. Some tried to maintain their skepticism, testing her with minor misdirections or exaggerated mistakes, but each time responded with the same calm professionalism. She was a paradox, approachable yet authoritative, quiet yet commanding. The tension within the unit began to shift. The men who had been planning to mock her now found themselves studying her techniques, trying to learn without admitting it. Others, initially dismissive, began to mirror her approach in small ways, respecting her judgment and composure. Slowly, the culture around the gate was changing. His presence alone had begun to challenge assumptions, not through confrontation, but through consistent excellence. By the end of her shift, reflected briefly on the day's events. What had been intended as ridicule had become an opportunity to assert her competence, earn respect, and quietly reshape perceptions. The base, once filled with smug anticipation at her supposed failures, now buzzed with curiosity and grudging admiration. Smiled faintly, knowing that her first real victory wasn't just completing her duties, it was rewriting the narrative. Captain Monroe, still observing from afar, nodded to himself. He had seen something rare in a newcomer, not just skill, but character. Carter was not merely surviving her first week. She was beginning to redefine what leadership meant to this unit, quietly but unmistakably. By midweek, the whispers about Carter had grown louder. The men who had once joked about her gate duty now regarded her with cautious curiosity. Her calm professionalism and precision had not gone unnoticed, and even the most skeptical among the SEALs were beginning to reassess their assumptions. However, the real test was still ahead. a scheduled security drill designed to simulate a base breach. It was a high-pressure scenario meant to challenge the entire team, and the gate, her post, would be the first line of defense. The morning was tense, the base buzzing with anticipation. SEALs moved briskly, reviewing protocols and rehearsing responses. Arrived at the gate, logs in hand, scanning vehicles and personnel with her usual meticulous attention. The drill would test her vigilance, decision-making, and ability to respond under pressure. It wasn't just about protocol. It was about control, leadership, and composure. She had handled routine gate duty expertly, but now the stakes were higher, and any mistake could carry consequences for the entire unit. Drill began subtly. A vehicle approached the gate at an unusual speed, its identification missing several crucial elements. Eyes narrowed, taking in every detail: the license plate, the driver's behavior, the speed. She immediately radioed internal security, requesting verification while instructing the vehicle to stop at a designated checkpoint. Nearby SEALs glanced at each other, impressed yet tense. Many had doubted her capability, but now they watched with a mix of astonishment and respect. As more vehicles approached, some simulating threats and others diversions, his composure never wavered. She directed each with clarity, handling incorrect documentation, aggressive approaches, and simulated emergencies with calm precision. Her eyes missed nothing, her voice remained steady, and her decisions were executed with authority. Even the men who had tried to challenge her earlier recognized that she was not just performing a task. She was orchestrating the flow of the drill with the confidence of a seasoned officer. Captain Monroe observed silently from a distance, his sharp eyes noting every action. He had seen countless officers in drills, some panicking, some overcompensating, and some failing to think critically under pressure. However, moved with a rare balance of decisiveness and poise, he recognized in her not just skill, but leadership potential, the kind that could inspire confidence in others and command respect in moments of chaos. Midway through the exercise, a simulated security breach tested her further. An unmarked vehicle approached quickly, and two actors posed as armed intruders. Response was swift and precise. She directed the security team to intercept while maintaining control of the gate, ensuring civilians, simulated in the drill, were safe. She communicated clearly, coordinating multiple moving parts without hesitation. The SEALs, who had expected her to falter, now stared in awe. Some whispered, "She's in a league of her own." By the end of the drill, the base was secure, the scenario successfully contained, and had proven herself beyond doubt. The SEALs around her, including the skeptics, acknowledged her competence silently. A few nodded with respect, others offered quiet murmurs of approval. Unaware of the full extent of the attention she had garnered, returned to her logs, completing her duties as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. As the team gathered afterward, Captain Monroe approached. He didn't speak immediately, but his eyes lingered on with a mixture of appraisal and approval. The men had witnessed her skill under real pressure, and Monroe knew that her quiet authority had transformed the perception of her within the unit. His calm, strategic actions had not just passed the drill, they had set a new standard. By the time the sun began to set, left the gate with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. What began as a routine and lowly assignment had become a proving ground, revealing her true strength to those who had doubted her. The SEALs whispered in admiration, and Captain Monroe had made a note. This officer was destined for more than gate duty. She had earned respect through competence, composure, and leadership, qualities that would not go unnoticed for long. The following morning, the atmosphere around the SEAL base had shifted. Carter's actions during the security drill were no longer quietly noted. They had become the subject of discussion across the unit. The men who had once planned to mock her now exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to interact with her. Rumors of her composure, her precision, and her leadership under pressure spread quickly, whispered in barracks, hallways, and even in the mess hall. Some doubted whether they should continue challenging her. Others tried to maintain of indifference, though the tension in their postures betrayed their uncertainty. arrived at her post as usual, unaware of the swirling conversations. To her, gate duty was a responsibility, not a stage. She began logging vehicles, checking credentials, and scanning every arrival with her usual meticulous care. But subtle changes were apparent. The men who had lingered casually around the gate were now more cautious, offering hesitant nods instead of smirks. Some SEALs who had whispered jokes yesterday now studied her silently, evaluating her every move. Focus remained on her work, yet her presence alone had begun to command attention. Captain Monroe, the SEAL commander, had been observing from a distance for weeks. He had seen new officers come and go, some overwhelmed, some arrogant, but had shown a combination of skill, poise, and strategic thinking rarely found in someone so early in their assignment. He had watched her during minor incidents, security challenges, and the high-pressure drill, noting her ability to manage complex situations without panic or hesitation. Monroe understood instinctively that quiet authority was reshaping the perception of leadership within the unit. By mid-morning, the subtle resistance among her peers became evident. A few of the more skeptical SEALs attempted to create minor challenges, from misfiled paperwork to exaggerated procedural questions, hopping to see if she could be rattled. Handled each calmly and efficiently, correcting errors without condescension, issuing instructions with clarity, and maintaining control without confrontation. Each successful handling of these tests furthered her growing reputation. Those who had doubted her now faced the uncomfortable truth. She was capable, precise, and unflappable under pressure. The tension reached its peak when a surprise inspection was announced by the unit's senior officers. Vehicles, personnel, and security protocols were scrutinized, and every officer on duty was evaluated. Section the gate was under intense observation. She worked systematically, anticipating the inspector's needs, guiding her team with subtle authority and demonstrating both knowledge and adaptability. By the time the inspection concluded, not a single procedure had been overlooked. The SEALs who had expected errors or hesitation were left impressed. As the day wore on, reflected briefly on the challenges she had faced. The joke of her initial assignment had transformed into an ongoing test of competence, character, and resilience. Each obstacle she overcame reinforced her confidence and quietly demanded the respect of those around her. Even those who still resisted acknowledging her skill found themselves reconsidering their stance. She had turned a routine, low-status post into a stage for proving her strength. By late afternoon, the tension among the SEALs was palpable. Whispers of admiration mixed with grudging acknowledgement of her abilities. Some began to approach her cautiously, asking questions or offering minor assistance, unsure whether she would see it as patronizing or welcome. Received each interaction with calm professionalism, never condescending, never defensive. Her quiet competence continued to shift the dynamics of the unit, creating a subtle but undeniable ripple of respect. Captain Monroe, observing from his vantage point, noted the culmination of days of testing and observation. Had not only survived the challenges but had earned recognition through action alone. He was preparing to formalize that acknowledgement, a rare and deliberate gesture that would resonate deeply within the unit. The stage was set, the attention focused, and Carter's moment of recognition was approaching. The day ended with leaving her post, unaware that her quiet persistence, strategic thinking, and unwavering composure had set the entire unit abuzz. What had begun as a simple assignment had become a crucible, shaping perceptions and preparing the ground for the honor she had truly earned. The next morning, a hush fell over the SEAL base. Word had spread quietly but unmistakably. Captain James Monroe would be addressing the unit. Rumors swirled about a rare acknowledgement, one typically reserved for extraordinary achievement. Carter arrived at her post, unaware that she was the center of the anticipation. The men who had once mocked her now stole glances, curiosity and nervousness etched into their faces. Even those who still resisted acknowledgement felt the tension in the air, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Maintained her usual composure, checking IDs, logging vehicles, and scanning arrivals with meticulous attention. Her focus was unwavering, yet she couldn't help noticing the unusual stillness around her. Conversations had died down, casual smirks had vanished, and the SEALs stationed nearby were unusually quiet, almost reverent. His mind, ever disciplined, remained on duty, but a subtle awareness told her that today was different. She had faced tests, challenges, and scrutiny before, but the atmosphere now carried weight, an impending judgment that extended beyond procedure. Captain Monroe appeared in the central courtyard, full uniform gleaming, his posture commanding attention without a word. The men instinctively straightened, some stiff with apprehension, others with quiet respect. A murmur ran through the gathered personnel. They all knew Monroe rarely issued commendations so publicly, and when he did, it carried profound significance. All eyes were now on, whose calm presence at the gate drew immediate contrast to the collective tension of the unit. The men froze, suddenly aware that the new officer they had underestimated was about to be formally recognized. Monroe's voice, crisp and authoritative, echoed across the courtyard. "Lieutenant Carter," he began, pausing for effect, "has demonstrated exceptional professionalism, composure, and leadership under pressure." The words carried weight, amplified by the silence that followed. The men who had planned jokes, who had whispered derision, felt a shift in the air, something they hadn't anticipated. They had underestimated her, and now the consequences of that misjudgment were undeniable. His expression remained composed, though a flicker of surprise crossed her eyes. She straightened, listening carefully as Monroe detailed her achievements, handling gate duty flawlessly, managing high-pressure scenarios during the drill, and maintaining authority with a quiet, unwavering confidence. Each sentence highlighted her discipline, her skill, and her ability to command respect through action rather than words. The SEALs around her exchanged glances. Some looked away, embarrassed, while others nodded subtly, recognizing the truth they could no longer deny. When Monroe concluded, he paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Then, in a rare gesture of respect, he rose slightly from his stance, a formal salute too. The courtyard remained silent, the men frozen in place, absorbing the significance of the moment. Maintaining her composure, returned the salute, understanding the magnitude of the recognition she had earned. It was more than praise. It was a validation of every sacrifice, every grueling training session, every doubt she had overcome to stand in that exact position. For the SEALs, the moment was transformative. The men who had laughed at her now felt a mixture of humility and awe. Some whispered apologies under their breath, others simply nodded, acknowledging her quiet authority. His demeanor, never boastful, made the honor even more powerful. She had not sought recognition, but through her actions she had compelled respect. As the courtyard gradually returned to its normal rhythm, returned to her duties at the gate, logs in hand. Yet the air had changed. The perception of her within the unit was irrevocably altered. She had proven that true leadership is measured not by assignments given or rank alone, but by competence, courage, and integrity under pressure. For Carter, the joke of gate duty had become her defining moment. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the SEAL base, casting long shadows across the courtyard and the perimeter where Carter had spent the past week proving herself. The gate, once a stage for a joke, had transformed into a proving ground, a place where her quiet professionalism, unshakable composure, and decisive leadership had left an indelible mark. She walked the perimeter, logs in hand, maintaining her watchful presence even as whispers and glances followed her silently. The dynamics of the unit had changed irrevocably. What had been skepticism was now respect, admiration, and even a touch of inspiration. Reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From long nights of training, endless drills, and countless early mornings, she had prepared for challenges that no one could fully predict. Yet this week had been different. She had arrived at the gate, expecting routine monotony, only to find herself under constant scrutiny, subjected to whispers, micro-challenges, and the subtle games of a unit eager to test her limits. Each moment had been a test, not of strength or skill alone, but of character, patience, and courage under observation. and she had excelled. The men around her, once dismissive and amused at the assignment, now regarded her differently. Some approached hesitantly, offering nods of acknowledgement or quiet words of admiration. Others, more reticent, observed from a distance, perhaps questioning their own assumptions and judgments, received these gestures with quiet dignity. She did not boast or demand recognition. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. The respect she had earned was genuine and lasting because it was deserved, not granted by rank or protocol. Captain Monroe watched from afar, noting the subtle transformations among the SEALs. He had known from the first moments he observed at the gate that she possessed rare qualities, a combination of focus, poise, and strategic thinking that set her apart. Yet even he was impressed by the depth of impact she had already made on the unit. Her conduct had not only proven her competence, but had quietly challenged the cultural assumptions about leadership, gender, and respect within the ranks. Monroe made a mental note. Carter would be someone to watch, someone who could inspire loyalty, courage, and excellence among the team. As completed her final checks for the day, a few of the previously skeptical SEALs approached, their gestures cautious but sincere. "Lieutenant," one said, hesitating, we didn't give you the credit you deserved earlier. You've handled everything flawlessly." Offered a small, appreciative nod, her calm smile conveying acknowledgement without pride. Another simply extended a hand which she shook firmly. These interactions, small as they were, marked a shift not just in perception, but in the culture of the unit, a ripple effect from one officer's steadfast professionalism. Walking away from the gate took a moment to look back. The assignment that had begun as a joke intended to humble her had instead become a defining chapter in her career. It had revealed her resilience, her strategic mind, and her ability to remain composed under scrutiny. More than that, it had allowed her to quietly demonstrate that true leadership is earned, not assumed, and that respect cannot be demanded. It must be commanded through action, integrity, and courage. As night fell, the base settled into a calm routine. Thoughts lingered on the lessons she had learned and the quiet victories she had earned. The SEALs would carry those memories forward, perhaps reshaping their own understanding of leadership and resilience. And for her part, knew that this was only the beginning. The gate duty, the challenges, and the recognition were milestones, not endpoints. She had proven herself not only to the unit but to herself, and the path ahead, though demanding, was now filled with confidence, respect, and purpose. The base lights flickered on, illuminating the perimeter as continued her watch. Behind her, the whispers of doubt had transformed into acknowledgement, the jokes into admiration, and the skepticism into respect. She was no longer just a new officer on gate duty. She was a symbol of perseverance, excellence, and quiet leadership, leaving an imprint on the unit that would be remembered long after her shift ended. And as she stood there, alert and composed, it was clear. Carter had turned a simple assignment into a legacy.